a lot of people who come to a sex coach are coming far too late, and the
Yes.
relationship is all
Yes.
but ended, and this is like their last ditch effort, and there really isn't saving it.
Welcome to the Ask Ezra Intimacy Coaching Podcast, a peek behind the curtain of some of the most intimate conversations that people have with Ezra as an intimacy coach. Join us for a session already in progress.
How do we know each other, Dr. Patti?
Well, we know each other in a couple of ways, don't we? We are both in the Los Angeles, well, I'd say the greater Southern California area. And you attended this wonderful live event for Sex Coach U. And that was held, oh God, I don't know what, last summer sometime.
Sure,
And we
maybe
got
fall,
to
yeah.
spend some time talking, and I knew what you had been doing as really a leader in the BDSM kink fetish community in the Los Angeles area with your work at Sanctuary LAX
Mm-hmm.
in particular. And you've been a member of WASC, the World Association for Sex Coaches, and we loved you. And so, lo and behold, then you ended up coming into Sex Coach U as a student doing amazing work to kind of round out what you already know. And I also had you become a teacher for a private session in flogging and other implements of pleasure for me and my partner. And that was extraordinary.
I'm
So
glad you
that's how
liked
I
it.
know you.
Yeah. Yeah, you were great, you were a great student. It was an honor to have you,
Thank you.
and it was good fun.
It was
So,
great. It
yeah,
was great. Yes. Yes.
fantastic.
Technique keeps improving.
Yeah, you got to keep it moving. You got to keep,
Yeah.
keep adding skills. Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
And the
you
more you
do.
do it, like I used to teach snowboarding. Um
Oh,
and yeah, it was
wow.
my first teaching gig was snowboarding in college. And the first day you do it, it's so hard because you don't know which
Yeah.
muscles to use, you don't know what techniques to do, so you spend like 10 times as much energy as you might on a regular run when you kind of get a sense of what you're doing. And
Uh-huh.
it's so the same,
Yeah.
when you're flogging, it's if you're spending all your energy trying to make it do things it's not going to do, then you spend a lot of energy, and once you finally get it, you sort of let the flogger do what it's going to do, and you're just there to
Yeah.
facilitate,
Yeah.
and it's 10%
It's
the effort.
wonderful. Impact play, sensory exploration.
Hmm.
And I enjoy being the one administering the flogging too.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
What a surprise.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm not surprised at all, but
No, I know you're not. I know.
um
So, what are we talking about today?
oh well, I'm just going to probe your wealth of knowledge and your experience, and try to sort of share some of that with the audience of, around sex coaching and your experience and the history of it, and maybe even the future.
Great.
So,
Good. Oh, I'd love to talk about that.
yeah. So
Yeah.
my first question is,
Yeah.
how would you define sex coaching?
Well, I'm the mother of sex coaching. So I created this profession in 1993 when I had just completed my PhD at the esteemed Institute for the Advanced Study of Human Sexuality in San Francisco. And I don't know if you know this, I was trained as a sexuality educator. I'd done a lot of work as a nationally known sexuality educator, but I also earned a certificate in sex therapy from the Institute. And I just didn't resonate with that concept or that approach. And so I was asked to do a talk at a workshop in northern New England, and they said, "Well, what are you doing now?" I said, "Well, I'm calling it sex coaching." And the woman said, "Well, why don't you come and do a presentation on it?" And that's when it all kind of gelled. And so I evolved this methodology in a sense, but I guess it's an approach, which is a way of helping clients become sexually self realized, to
Mm-hmm.
heal. to become whole, to overcome their barriers, their obstacles, their wounding, whatever it is. And it's the combination of the what of sexology, which has always been what I've been doing. I've always been a clinical sexologist, but I've also become a fan of, and really in the beginning of the creation of sex coaching as a profession, looked at the how of coaching, meaning life or personal coaching, because it's so positive. It's so much about positive collaboration. It's about depathologizing. And you know as well as I do that so much around sex is stigmatized, is steeped in shame, guilt, fear, all the other really uncomfortable emotions. And coaching was just like this way of partnering with the client toward their wholeness, toward their goals. Very dynamic, very interactive, very much like we're talking now, a conversation, but always lifting that client up and holding the bar high, very coachy kind of terminology about, I know you can be, do, or have whatever it is you want, you aspire to. And so coaching was this really positive way of relating to and with a client to take them on that journey toward whatever it is they've come to you as the clinician to overcome or resolve or experience. And in the beginning, I was in Manhattan in New York City. That's how I started my work in sex coaching. And then, of course, about 25 years ago, moved to Los Angeles area. And I just had this amazing experience myself of seeing the range of sexuality, the range of people who really can benefit from and thrive through a sex coaching approach. In fact, it's funny. I actually get calls today or emails today of people saying, look, we've been in therapy for so many years, or I've been in therapy for so many years, and I want a sex coach. I don't want a therapist. Been there, done that. And a lot of therapists, unfortunately, are not trained in sexuality. So coaching is a fresher, more organic, more partnership of an approach of helping somebody really move through or work through what's stopping them from being fulfilled. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. And I heard you say, investigating the what and the how. And I think that's a great way to sort of differentiate from therapy, because don't they focus on the why in therapy? Right?
Oh, that nasty three-letter word. That is this eternal, infinite drilling down. And I'm not anti-therapy. Let me say that psychotherapy. Mental health is real. Mental health challenges are real, and they need to be addressed. And in fact, it's very important that somebody who's suffering from a mental health dysfunction, I'll call it illness or disorder that's been diagnosed, they really need the help around that in order to be eligible for sex coaching. If I have a client who's severely depressed, I can talk with them. I can give them behavioral home assignments till the cows come home. And they're not going to be able to do that because they're going to be stuck in that mental health disorder or condition.
Yeah.
So therapy is very important when you legitimately have a mental health concern. The problem that I have is that a lot of therapy doesn't understand sexology, and that therapists in general in the United States, and I know, we're talking to people, you might be anywhere in the world, right? Listening and watching. But really, psychotherapy is meant to address mental health issues. And it often doesn't even get to what I consider to be the bullseye, the core of self, imbues and embeds our sexual self. And so that's really the work that I do and that I train others to do, is to help people find that core and to embrace it, to honor it, to open that up and to be well and to be happy about that part of self. So, therapy, coaching, they're all modalities for helping people achieve their goals. And we know from neuroscience, now I'm going to go down a little rabbit hole. We know from neuroscience that the more you go down the same mental pathway or neural pathway, the more you strengthen it. And this is one of my concerns about talk therapy that is a repeating of the trauma event, of your unhappiness, of what happened to you when you were 4, or what you're not doing or what you're not getting in your relationship. And it strengthens the wounding. It doesn't elevate you. And that's why I love coaching, because we create a space where people can bring their emotional selves and their emotional responses. Of course, we're all human. We have emotions, but we don't focus on emotions. We honor them. We acknowledge them. We may even bring them into the conversation naturally, but we don't process emotions, and we don't go back to why, which is really, almost a doomsday spin for some people.
Yeah, and I hear that question a lot, the question of why, and almost invariably it is about conditional acceptance, right? Like you might ask the question of like, are people born gay, or do they choose to be gay, or do they learn to be gay? And without addressing that question, we might focus on that question as a way of putting off acceptance and say, well, if I know where it's coming from, maybe then I can decide whether I'm going to accept it or not, right? Yeah. And so in my work, that's a huge red flag of we're stuck in a non-acceptance position. We're stuck in a if this happened to me, maybe I can accept it. If I made the choice, then maybe I made the wrong choice or something, and those are traps. Those are traps of non-acceptance, right?
And the truth is that we may never know why. And this is one of the issues that comes up a lot in our conversations as clinical sexologists. I'm a clinical sexologist, first and foremost, who founded another way of working with clients called sex coaching. Clinical sexology is the study of what people do sexually and how they think and feel about it. Or it's our relationship with ourselves and the impact that we have on self, others, and I like to add the environment. Kudos to Annie Sprinkle and Beth Stevens, who really are the voices for eco-sexology, which is a whole other conversation. But it's interesting that you say this why question is really about lack of acceptance. And just yesterday, I had a first session with a couple who are sexless, which is a lot of the type of clients that I serve. And what happened after our conversation of an hour of pulling out, what do you want? What's working? What's not working? What's going on? The how, the what, the when, but not the why. And getting to this place where what's really stopping this couple from having a connection sexually, having pleasure sexually, having any kind of activity sexually, is because of his lack of self-acceptance. It's fascinating. And it's, in his case, it's self-loathing and self-deprecation and a sense of, I got to know the why. And I know that the why is I have a low T count. I have low testosterone. That's the problem for every single thing in my life. That's why my career isn't working. That's why I hate myself. That's why I don't have a lot of energy and I've gained weight. And it's like, oh no, first of all, nothing's ever that simple, but bringing it back to the why, we can spend a lifetime in pursuit of the why and never know who we are and never feel fulfilled and awake and alive to express who we really are, sexually, erotically, even just as a human being. And that lack of acceptance of self, what I wrote in my session notes, which I always send to my clients after a session, is, this is a heterosexual couple, she appreciated at the end of our session in her takeaway, how I end every session, what are you taking away from this? That I validated her perception that until you accept yourself and you have a positive relationship with yourself, you can't share that with somebody, even somebody you love and live with. And so that notion of self-acceptance is at the core foundation of how we express joyfully and happily who we are as sexual beings.
That sounds
And
so
sex
right to
coaching
me.
gets you there.
Yeah,
if you know how to
absolutely.
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to share an analogy that that I was thinking about when you're talking about coming to the table with mental health challenges and how you really need to sort of have a stable footing to work on sex coaching, right? It's almost like as sex coaches, we're like sports coaches. And if you're recovering from a knee
Ah,
injury or a broken leg or something like that, like we can't
yeah.
really play baseball, right? You can't expect a sports coach to coach you how to play with a broken ankle, right?
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
You can't play with an injury until that injury is healed.
Mm,
Sometimes you need to have the right medicine to know how to heal that injury.
yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
part of that energy that is the medicine is the positive regard that we hold as coaches, that we're really always elevating the energies with our client and we're always giving them hope and possibilities. We're
Yeah.
really possibility coaches in many ways,
I
don't
like
you think?
that. Possibility
Yeah,
coaches.
yeah.
Yep. You mentioned clinical sexology. Can you tell me what is a clinical sexologist?
A sexologist is somebody who works with people in various ways. It could be an educator, a counselor, a therapist, a researcher, a pro dom, a body worker, a sexological body worker, whatever it is around sexuality that we identify as being part of this field, this profession, as sexologists who deal with what people do sexually and how they think and feel about it, right? That's the mantra that all of us were given and trained with at the institute in San Francisco by the founder, Reverend Dr. Ted McElvenna, who has died since, but he was a revolutionary in the world. And a clinical sexologist is somebody who works with clients. Kind of simple. That we have a client-centered approach. And I love the terminology clinical sexologist because the term sex coach can really be a trigger for some people. It can be misinterpreted as, oh, you stand there with pom-poms and go, rah, rah, show me how you have sex. And I once did a Playboy. This is so funny. Don't go there in your mind. I once did a Playboy episode. They had a sex education program on the Playboy channel. And they had a host, a woman, who was, I don't know if she was a Playboy model at one point or not, but they wanted to interview me about this new thing called sex coaching. What is it? And of course, what they did is they brought in a heterosexual couple and two women, cisgendered women, and they were naked. So I walk in the hotel room and these four naked people are there, and the host, who's wearing a cheerleader outfit with pom-poms in her hand and a big rubber finger. Okay. And she says, so Dr. Patti, we're going to talk about sex coaching. And I'm like, oh my God. But I handled it beautifully. I coached the naked couple on the bed. The two women were behind me naked, playing with my hair. And I just educated. And I thought, oh, this is what people think sex coaching is. And
Yeah.
it's so much more than this. It's a educational and a clinical opportunity for people to grow, to learn, to, so many aspects. But it's the way I train people. It's a talking process to get you free, but not in that way.
Yeah.
So that was a moment. You know what? That still plays somewhere on Playboy Channel.
I bet it does. Yeah, I bet it does. It's all still, the internet is forever, right?
Forever, right? Once in a while, I get an email like, Dr. Britton, I saw you on. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
So we have a lot.
I'm plagued with the mind fucking book because
Yeah.
everybody thinks I'm messing with them now all the time, right? I can't get
Mm.
away with anything. If I want to mess with somebody, they're always going to see it coming.
They're going to say, oh, you're the guy who.
I had a class. I was teaching the mind fucking class, and the person who was supposed to open the dungeon space was late by 20 minutes. Incredibly unprofessional. And here I am with all of the attendees. We had like 50 people waiting in the lobby. and me, and people go, I bet he's doing this on purpose. I go, yeah, that's it. Yep, messing with ya.
Getting you ready.
It's an awfully boring mindfuck.
Certainly.
So really the only thing I can do these days is to play it straight. And then people assume that I'm messing with them and they're waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then I just play it straight. And that's all
I love it.
It's a mindfuck, not mindfuck. It's a
mind
paradox.
fucking in itself around mind fucking.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a paradox. You are if you do, and you are if you don't.
Yeah,
so,
I love it. I love it.
Well. Oh well, can't take it back. So I would love to hear, speaking of books, I'd love to hear about the art of sex coaching and what was the significance for that, like for you personally and for the sex coaching community.
Well, it's still the first and the only book ever written on, like, a training manual on sex coaching as a profession. And what's interesting about it is that I had already written a book on HIV/AIDS prevention for teachers around the nation, which was part of a project I ran, funded by the Centers for Disease Control at that time. And I had written an erotic novel, and I had just finished writing An Idiot's Guide to Sensual Massage, which is really a book on foreplay. And I get this call, and it's somebody saying, Patti, I don't know if you'd be interested, but we'd like for you to write a book. And it was the editor from Norton and Company, who became somebody I cherish dearly. And he said, you've been highly recommended. We do coaching books, but we've never had anybody write anything about sex coaching. We didn't even know it exists. And I went, okay. And so Patrick Williams, who was very famous, is still very famous as a life coach trainer, was one of the first life coach training institute leaders in the world. And he had written some of the best books on life coaching, personal coaching. And he recommended me, and he wrote my foreword, actually. And so I had to go through the protocol of writing a book proposal for a book I had been asked to write and was slated to write. And that was fun, and it helped me organize my thinking. And it was just like, what do you really need to know and be able to do if you're going to do this work? Because sex is layered, complex, and deep. It's not just about how to give a good blowjob, which is important, one knows, or, how to achieve orgasms that last 2 hours through advanced tantric techniques or breath work or this or that. But rather, let's look at the whole of it. And so in that book, I identified 46 individual sexually related concerns that could be addressed by somebody who identifies as a sex coach, and how to become that. And then later on, that book was published in 2005. I'm shocked in a way that there has been no other book released that I know of in the language of English that is another book or training manual on sex coaching and how to be or do it. But also, there's been very little that's been produced in academic literature. There are a couple of papers that have been written, many presentations that my team and I have given at world congresses, which are sexology meetings that occur all around the world. But really, there's been very little that has been published that is a guidebook, that is a training manual, and that really pulls it apart and talks about I have systems that I describe in it, including like what are the steps to orgasm, the 9 steps to orgasm for female identified bodies, or what are the phases of a sex coaching session, or what are the causal factors for these 46 concerns, and what are the options for resolving them for these 46 concerns. And it was so much fun to write. I don't remember how long it took me to write. Most of my books that I've written within a very short span, like 2 to 3 months. That's just writing it. I love writing that way. And the book is the textbook, one of the textbooks for all of our training at Sex Coach U. Sexcoachu.com is the website for it. And it's still germane. Now, at Sex Coach U, of course, that was 2005. SEX is still the same, but how we talk about SEX is really different. We have pronouns, we have gender identity, sexual orientation, LGBTQIA+++, conversations. We have an emphasis on consent. We talk about polyamorous relationships, consensual non-monogamy. I mean, the whole world has shifted and in many ways opened up, but also in many ways it's closing in. And that's one of my passions, is training people who are properly trained, well trained, certifying people who are qualified to do this work from a very professional, comprehensive point of view that encompasses literature, that encompasses science, that encompasses evidence. It's evidence-based, including our systemic models that you're trained in. And I feel like it's so important that anybody can call themselves a sex coach or an anything coach. You know that. Coaching is unregulated. Mm-hmm. So if somebody is a football coach, they can just say, I'm a football coach. If they're paid, maybe they have to show something. But in the world of life and personal and executive and all the main idea around coaching as a talk experience with a client or clients, it's unregulated. And so there are coaches for everything. And there are people who have no business calling themselves sex coaches who really are not understanding the comprehensiveness of what it is you need to know and be able to do, and who may be doing harm. And that's my issue. I want people never to receive harm from those who appear to be offering help for them. So, it's been my passion. We started Sex Coach U in 2010. My beloved, I can't get the words out, Dr. Robert Dunlap. We co-founded Sex Coach U in 2010. We're now in our 13th year. So, we've been around for a long time, and we've enhanced and amended and up-leveled that program many, many times. But there still is a way of looking at, getting back to your question, the art of sex coaching as the fundamentals. Those are the fundamentals. That's the foundation of really what people need to read and understand, take in, and be able to utilize. And we also have composed, we haven't published it, but for SCU students, we have a compendium handbook. Mm-hmm. So we've updated things like, at the time, every single word in that book was timely, exactly appropriate for the time in which it was published. Well, now we don't say transvestite or transsexual. We say trans person, trans-identified person. And so nuances like that, of course, had to be updated, and they are in our companion handbook. Mm-hmm. There is an initiative right now at Sex Coach U that we may be creating a new workbook that will be published, that will be available for people who really want more of a kind of DIY experience to understand what you need to know and be able to do, because not everybody is going to get the professional training and earn their certification, mm-hmm. right? I mean, not everybody has that capacity to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a small course. It's not a weekend course.
No, it's not, go get trained as a, certified coach in 30 hours.
Yeah. I've even seen like you get your certificate in 2 hours or something. I've seen something like that before, which is.
Now I'm really scared because these are real human beings. Yeah. And you're tapping into probably the most delicate region of their self, which is their sexual self. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's so vulnerable. It's so delicate. It's so armored for most people. And when they come for our services, they really need to feel safe. They need to trust, and they need to be taken care of. It's very delicate work, and it's very deep work. Mm. And I have right now, I mostly seem to work with couples who are sexless of all ages, but my sweet spot is working with aging and sexuality. Mm-hmm. That's because that's my peer group, and that group of people really needs help because they have so many misheld beliefs about how they should be at that age, what's possible, what other people are doing. I used to study with Dr. Albert Ellis, and he was he was one of the fathers of sex therapy and therapy. He developed a form of cognitive behavioral therapy called REBT, Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy. I studied his work, and I was also his patient for 3 sessions, which was quite an experience for me in New York. And he was a kind of irascible old fart, and he would do Friday evenings for $5. Anybody off the streets of Manhattan could come in and get free therapy from him. And so he'd lie in his chair because he had physiological difficulty. He'd lie back in this chair in this hall in this apartment building, and he'd have a Rolodex with little cards on it and go that he would always be spinning. And he would have people come in, and here's a true story. One Friday, my partner then and I went, because he was also a sexologist, and we thought, oh my God, we need to see what he does. And so this guy came up and he said, I'm really upset. I hate myself. I hate life. And so Albert Ellis asked him a few questions. It was, he was a sexuality expert. And so he looks at him and he says, okay, I get it. So it seems to me like you have a pitchfork up your ass. Is that right? And the guy went, yes. and I turned to my partner and I went, oh my God, this guy has just given us the permission to be real, to be authentic, and to say things that, maybe not so professional sounding, but that get to the truth of who it is you're in front of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And also humor. So he used to say, stop shoulding on yourself. And I say that to my clients sometimes. Stop shoulding on yourself. Mm-hmm. And they say, oh my God, I get it.
Yeah, sometimes you have to tell people to stop shoulding on you.
Oh, well, yeah. There's that also. I've never done that. I'm mostly focused on them and them.
Yeah.
If you like the Ask Ezra podcast, then let me know. Comment on your favorite episode. Let us know what you enjoyed or what you'd like to see more of.
I just wanted to say I love your list of, was it 46 challenges?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that 46. List because I think one of the things that's really challenging as a sex coach is that you tend to attract a certain kind of person energetically, just because of the media you put out. And so you tend to get like a similar challenge, but also to know that there are these, they might also be experiencing low desire. They might also be experiencing mismatched desire. They might be experiencing early ejaculation or even late ejaculation, right?
Correct.
Delayed,
Right.
So just to sort of know what is likely to be occurring, I think is really valuable as a really valuable resource as a sex coach to sort of know that those are the things that happen.
You're never going to get a simple case. Mm-hmm. You're never going to get somebody who just has one.
Yeah.
The couple I was talking about where his self-loathing is so profound that he's like locked in his own prison of self, and where his low T is an issue, that's real, that's physiological. However, it's never just the low T. And this is what I actually said to him in session, is that nothing is ever just as simple as one causal factor. So we have to really be trained well to know how do we do that complex assessment, because it's a checklist of all these possibilities, not the possibilities of what they can be experiencing for pleasure and connection and whatever else they're looking for, but the possibilities of what's blocking them. So we have to know all the way from what is free testosterone and what is the total range of testosterone lab test result measure that we ask our client to give us, all the way to maybe we need to do a releasing ritual at a vortex of energy in Malibu so that you can let balloons go into the air and release your grief or your rage. And that's truly holistic. And that's how I work with my clients. And that's how I train my students how to be.
Sure. And you also sort of organically answered one of my favorite questions, which is like, who's your favorite kind of client? And what I heard
Mm.
was, aging and sexuality and also
Mhm.
sexless couples. But I want to sort of ask you directly, and is there a favorite kind of concern or favorite kind of client that you have?
Well, it used to be females. It used to be cisgendered females. But remember, I've been doing this work for over 40 years. So in the beginning, establishing sex coaching in 1993, I've had a private practice since then. And I was very involved with women's empowerment, with women's consciousness raising, with feminist rights issues. So women
Mm-hmm.
seem to be my target audience. And because women were not given the same access to information or transformational kinds of experiences. Well, now that's changed. I really believe that's changed. And some of my really favorite types of clients are the 40-year-old virgin cisgendered male,
Sure.
somebody who sits in front of what we're doing right now. We're not in the same room. We're looking at a screen. We're looking at a computer. We're living a virtual life. The guys who are probably socially inept. They don't
Mm-hmm.
know how to relate. Maybe they masturbate to porn, which if they're doing compulsively is problematic. Not if they do it, porn's fine. But really, it's men who need to have an experience, who need to break free of that being locked in and locked away from
Mm.
human connection and human touch and sexuality with others. And so one of my favorite things that I love to do is to work with let's call it a virgin male in his mid 40s often, who has never experienced sexual contact with anybody else, and who I work with for a series of sessions. And then we work in usually a weekend intensive with a surrogate partner therapist, because I'm trained to work in a surrogate partner therapy triadic model. And
Mm.
so that person does the touching, I do the talking, and the process is among the three of us. That is the most exquisite work. And I guess the other is I it's really interesting. We work in a context of what's going on around us. And even though I spend 80% of my time, if not more, as the CEO of Sex Coach U, which is a very complex organization, actually. We have over 150 active students. We've graduated over 200 students. We have a team of 17, 4 countries. It's a busy job. And I also love having clients because it gives me an opportunity to keep my craft fresh, to be authentic, and still serving real people in real time and space, usually on Zoom, by the way. Nobody wants to meet in person anymore. And what I find is that right now my heart is engaged in offering compassionate treatment or coaching. It's not really treatment for males,
Mm-hmm.
because men have been demonized. Men have been socially isolated, made into monsters. And for heterosexually oriented males, they are in such suffering right now. I'm not saying Me Too is bad. Me Too is absolutely important and right and timely. And everybody who has committed those acts of violating another person's consensual boundaries should be punished for that. However, I'm seeing that men don't know how to open up again. They don't know how to approach others. They don't know how to feel okay, because that toxic masculinity, the language is so harsh today. Toxic masculinity, predatory behavior, all of that is in the ethos. It's all around. And so my compassion is really to help men and help them heal from that and help them find new ways to express, because so many men are feeling locked out and isolated around being able to date, about touch. I remember when the Me Too issues surfaced and I had just lost my partner, Dr. Robert. I went to a conference in sexology, and this is somebody I've been with my partner for 17 years. And I had just come to the first conference since his death. And I'm a very known figure in these conferences. And 3 people came up to me who were men, and they said, "Oh, Patti, I'm so sorry. I'd love to give you a hug. Do I have your permission to give you a hug?" And I thought, oh my God, I've known these men for 25 plus years. I consider them friends, and they have to stop themselves and ask me, may I give you a hug for a tremendous traumatic loss in my life? And I said, of course. But it stopped me to really think about, where are we? What have we created? And so I feel so strongly that in my work, I am a voice for really combating the demonization of men, particularly heterosexual men, and serving couples who are just DOA. Most of my couples are dead on arrival. Some of them I like to say, why don't you just end this? It's not going to work, but that's not my job.
Yeah.
My job is to facilitate you, the client, knowing who you are, realizing what you want, where are your boundaries, what's going to really be healthy and healing for you, and then empowering them to make good choices. That's really what our work is about.
Yeah.
And there are so many sexless couples in this world.
Oh my goodness.
They're
oh my
everywhere.
Goodness. Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that was really eye-opening for me in the Sex Coach U program is that a lot of people who come to a sex coach are coming far too late, and the relationship is all but ended, and this is like their last ditch effort, and there really isn't saving it. And so the question is not, do you like throw it away or tell them to burn it down, but the question is sort of, how do you serve them when they're in the end of their relationship together, right?
It's hard work.
It is.
And sometimes the work is helping them to reframe, helping them to look for the good. I always begin with the question, what are your goals for our work together? And then I move into what's working. Because it's kind of like starting your day, and everybody watching and listening, take this in. Start every day with your 3 gratitudes of the morning when you wake up. That's going to set your day. That's your positive intention. That's going to dictate the quality of your life. And so when we start with what's working, and then we move into what's not working, which is, of course, what most of the work is about, we can always bring it back to that. And we can bring it back to what got you together in the first place. That's part of the how should I say it? Like the design of conversation in any kind of sexological couples work, for example. We come back to, what was the attraction? How did this begin? And also show me with your words, make a movie of how you have sex, how you do sex. That is like thousands and thousands of bits of information come out of that become little gateways. They're like tendrils that can take us back in to that relationship with them and help redirect them, because sometimes they're bored. Sometimes there's been a breach of trust, which is often a therapy issue, not a coaching issue. Sometimes it's about poor skills. She's faked orgasm for 15 years. And sex is less than mediocre. So desire, or, self-talk. What are you telling yourself? Oh, I'm too old. I'm too fat. I'm too thin. I'm too this. I'm too that. I'm not enough this. I'm not enough that. And helping to restate what we tell ourselves. Stop shoulding on yourself, a la, Albert Ellis. And he also had another great phrase, stop awfulizing, which is like catastrophizing everything.
Sure.
I love this guy. He was amazing. And sometimes it's really about allowing each person in the relationship to reconnect with their own power. Like, it's 2 individuals plus the relationship. So that's why I love couples work. It's much more interesting than an individual, because it's 3 clients, the one person, the other person, and the relationship itself. So there's so much material to pull apart and like move around like a sculptor might with clay. And it's also about enabling people to come to terms with their truth about who they are sexually, and then feel empowered, and I know that word is cliched a lot, but finding your own authentic self, your own power of choice, and then making the choice. And sometimes through the work that we do, we allow somebody to see, I'm not getting anything from this. All I'm getting is conflict. And what's stopping me is I'm afraid to be alone. I'm terrified to be alone. And that's why I cling to this toxic relationship. Many of them are toxic. And I can't let it go, because the pain of the toxic relationship right now, I perceive to be less pain than the pain of being alone. Isn't that the human condition often?
Often. Yeah. Far too often, I think it is.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we don't know how to be alone. And so that may be some of the work that I might do with a client, is to teach them how to embrace being alone, how to really enjoy being alone and find the pleasure, find the positives, find mechanisms that really enable you to feel whole without needing to feel that I need to fill the hole. I mean that metaphorically, with somebody else or by somebody else.
You never miss a chance to mention the innuendo.
The true sexologist in me, right?
That's my favorite question, because nobody ever answers it the same way. And I think I am hesitant to answer it again, because I often ask the question and then answer it, and I don't want to contradict myself, because there's a million ways to explain it. But so there are as many ways as there are to explain that. It seems there are just as many different models for sex coaching. So I wanted to ask you, what are some examples of models, and what is the significance of a coach having a model? And we're not talking about figure drawing or taking pictures, right? We're talking about like the schema of which they address these sexual concerns.
I was going to make a joke about nude drawing classes.
Got you. I got in front of it.
You stopped me. Okay. So you have to have a system. You have to have a replicable model or a system that you can rely on. You don't do this flying by the seat of your pants, which is unfortunately how people who are not trained properly or certified. And through the Sex Coach U model, we know what it is you need to know and what it is you have to really demonstrate your skills around. And that's the sexology and the coaching. We also have an entire entrepreneurship and business training program, because then you got to know how to take your gifts out into the world. But the most important thing, I'll share the models that we teach at Sex Coach U, which but I'll share with all of you who are watching and listening, which is we love Jack Annan's Plicit model, which came out of the 1970s. It formed the basis for how AASECT as an organization, we'll talk about that later, actually stratified its requirements for sexuality educators, counselors, and therapists. And it's how to move a client over time in the process of working with them. And it begins with giving permission. It's the single most important thing we can do. We can normalize and validate your perception, your experience, and really give you permission to go in that direction of your longing, or stop that thought, or accept yourself the way you are. That's what permission is all about. It's like establishing an energy field around that person and their thinking. Secondly, limited information. So over time, we begin with permission, then we give limited information. I once had a client who was of a culture where being identified as gay was not acceptable. And he came to me and he said, I watch porn, men having sex with men. I'm pretty sure I'm erotically gay, but I'm getting pressured to find a woman and get married, please my parents and my culture. What do I do? And I gave him limited information about, how many men being gay, being born gay, about how many men are gay, how many men identify as gay, how natural and normal that is. That is my position on it as part of nature, and that it's okay. So that's the permission, and then limited information. And then we moved into the work. TLI. So P for permission, LI, and then specific suggestions. That's what Plicit is really about. Over time, first you get them, the mindset, the permission, then limited information, calming it down, giving some normalization, and then specific suggestions. I want you to go out and do this. I want you to go there and come back and tell me what was that like. And he happened to be a person of great financial privilege. And he ended up going to other countries where he felt safe and wouldn't be known, and going into gay clubs, going into gay peep shows, going to erotic experiences, hiring a guy to do a naked lap dance on his lap, and then beginning to allow touch. He also had phobias about public health issues, like having semen touch the skin of his hand. So we had to normalize what's safe, what's not safe. It was a fascinating journey with him. And it lasted for several months, which sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I don't work week to week to week. I don't believe in that model. Like Tuesday at 4 is your time. You better be here every Tuesday. No, it's organic. It has to flow with real life. And are you doing your home assignments? Because if you're giving a home assignment for someone in specific suggestions and they're not doing it, we need to talk about what's in the way of your doing it. And you got to do it, because we're not going to have the same conversation over and over again, which is one of the downfalls of clinical work. And so IT is intensive training, the way that Dr. Annan created the Plicit model, PLISSIT, which in his perception of it was intensive therapy. We call it intensive coaching. So like that 40-year-old virgin I talked about, the intensive coaching part would be surrogate partner therapy, where we get out of this talk modality and we move it into a combination of talking and touching through a surrogate partner therapist who's going to facilitate his actually learning who he is as a sexual being, how to communicate with someone, how to touch another person, understanding sexual anatomy and function and arousal and orgasm and all of it, and intimacy. That's part of SPT work. So that's a primary model. And the other is the model I created, which is the MEBES model, known as MEBS. And I call it the MEBS signature system because that's my model. I train people under that model. Hundreds and hundreds of people have utilized it. It's evidence-based. We've done research on all of the components, and it's a holistic approach. It's the 5 parts of the sexual self: your mind, your emotions, your body, your energy, and your spirit. Not spirituality, not religion. It's the essence of self. I like to call it the little blue flame that lives at the bottom of, maybe at the chakra around the navel, that is the source of and center of our power, that the hara. Because I love the chakra systems and using chakras to understand where energy is and isn't. And the MEBS model actually aligns with the chakra system and other systems as well. So that's it. That's what I train people in, is the utilization of Plicit, move the client over time. And MEBS is how you can do an assessment from the very beginning. You can say, where are they stuck? In their mind, in their emotion, in their body, their energy, or spirit. Maybe it's all of it. And then, resolution. What can we do to unblock you? Well, we could in all of those 5 elements. And then that changes over time, because as sex coaches, just as I hope a good therapist would do, you get a new client and you do a great assessment. You go deep. I go really deep. And then you develop an action plan. What are we going to do with this client? Where are we going to take them? And that changes as they do things, as you learn more, as you get closer and more deep into their sexual soul, I'll say, and their lives. It may be that you learn that they actually, I've had this happen so many times, they actually don't have sex because they have very thin walls and one of them is afraid the kids might hear. or they've lived for years afraid the kids might hear. So they've shut down in a way.
Yeah.
Like they're like, oh, don't make a sound. So they've suppressed their sexual energy. Often when I'm training people to become more orgasmic, I train them in sounding. Like you have to make sound. Sound is energy coming up, coming out.
I went
Right?
right to urethral sounding.
Oh, ouch. Of course you did. I know.
I always have to think twice when we're talking about cognitive behavioral therapy too, because CBT means something else in BDSM.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I always have a laugh when somebody says, well, my methodology is CBT. Really? And do your listeners know what CBT is both ways?
Cognitive behavioral therapy and cock and ball torture, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And a lot of psychotherapists have no idea about that second meaning.
And they always wonder why like 10% of the audience is giggling just a little bit.
Like, what?
I love CBT. I bet you do.
Torture, is that a trauma event? No.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time here. We are coming on the end of our session.
Oh my God.
I want to ask, what have you got going on? How can people get a hold of you? And are there any other books you want to tell us about?
Well, I've written 5 books, and more actually. But I've written an erotic novel. It's on Amazon, The Adventures of Her in France. That was so much fun. And I've written a book on SAR, which is designing and leading a successful SAR for professionals who want to do what's called a sexual attitude reassessment training event. And that book was based on a global research study, the history of SAR, interviewing the creators of SAR, and how to do SAR. It's a training manual with 21 work pages in it, the 21 elements of a successful SAR. It was really fun to write too. And I'm very dedicated to continuing making sexcoachu.com the world's leading and original site for training and certifying sex coaches. We have grads and students in over 80 countries and Puerto Rico, which should be a country or a state. And I'm working on a memoir trilogy right now. I'm working on a memoir of my life and career, and that is really fun. And I would like to tell you I have a deadline to finish it. I don't. And I have a couple of other books in the pipeline. And I'm also about to, for the first time since COVID hit, so since 2019, no live events have occurred. But I'm opening the first live event intensive to be with me in person. And that will be in October in Northern California. And it's an advanced training for professionals who work in sexuality, which is AASECT, ASPEX, stands for Advanced Personal Sexological, Advanced Sexological Personal Exploration Experience. So it's aspectstraining.com. Believe it or not, we just started marketing it and we're half full. And it's going to be amazing. It's a 6-day experiential retreat in Northern California at a beautiful healing vortex in the woods. So that's what I'm about. I'm very busy doing other things with Sex Coach U and Sexology. And anybody who wants to know more can jump over to my website, drpattibritton.com, and sign up for the newsletter and a free ebook for helping people who are looking for happy, sexy aging tips. Because that's I just love writing about that and teaching
Wonderful.
About it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the Ask Ezra podcast, Dr. Patti.
It's been so much fun. Thank you for allowing me to go on tangents.
Of course.
I've enjoyed it a lot.
Thanks for watching the Ask Ezra Intimacy Coaching Podcast. Support our show at patreon.com/AskEzra. Join us at the personal growth tier and receive a special thank you on the next podcast episode. A very special thank you to both Sarah Nash and Deb Matson for being Patreon supporters at the personal growth tier and helping make the Ask Ezra Intimacy Coaching Podcast possible.